For our next session, which is the next generation researchers pitches, we will have 5 pitches, short pitches with a little bit of time for questions. And I'm really looking also forward to this session. And we will start with Mattia Cesaro with his first pitch. So please come and welcome you here.
Okay, so thank you. So let me start by asking you to imagine that you're falling inside a black hole. So of course you're doomed, but you might still be interested in thinking about what happens at the very center. And well, the short answer is that we don't know. And we don't know because the best description that we have of gravitational interaction, namely Einstein's theory of general relativity, breaks down in these extreme regimes, like the center of a black hole, or for example, the beginning of space and time, the Big Bang. And it is believed that only by correctly incorporating quantum mechanical effects, combining them with general relativity into a theory of quantum gravity, might provide us with the correct framework to address these questions. So my research takes place in the realm of quantum gravity theories. There are many candidate theories, none of which can claim success. I should be very honest with you. And in particular, I look at supergravity and string theory. You might be interested in asking, okay, but what can these theories actually tell us about these extreme regimes? And the answer lies in duality symmetries. So what is a duality? You're all familiar already with the wave-particle duality in quantum mechanics, and that's a very good start. But a good analogy, although a bit imperfect, could be trying to define yourself with a single word. That's a bit of a hard task, because of course you're a scientist, but you might be also at the same time a daughter or a son, and then a friend, and then you might like swimming, so you're a swimmer. So which one is the correct description? The answer is that they really all are correct descriptions of yourself, of an underlying concept which is yourself. And they're just highlighting different corners. Sometimes they look highly incompatible as well. Well, this is a duality in string theory. We have all these different string theories, which look like very different theories at first sight, but they're all really related by this mathematical object called duality, and they form a larger fundamental theory that nobody knows very well what it is. And okay, I provided you with an analogy, but what a duality really is, I don't really have a pointer here, but it's this weird object here, which is a highly mathematical picture. I won't describe you what it is, because it's a bit long. But okay, so what we are looking at the moment is in this extreme regime of the Big Bang, as we go backwards in time, we're trying to understand what happens when the concept of time, of space itself starts to lose meaning, and in a sense it de-emerges, and something more fundamental takes its place. And let me tell you that this something more fundamental, or a candidate for this something more fundamental, might be precisely this, oh, beautiful if you ask me, abstract mathematical object. So in a sense, the answer to what replaces space once this loses meaning at the center of black holes or in the Big Bang might be symmetries. Thank you.
So we have time for one quick question. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Do you change the meta content or the spectrum of your strings or something, or why do you say in there space is dissolving? So what is the symmetry about? Is it a space-time symmetry? Is it an internal symmetry? Or?
This is an excellent question. It's a very peculiar kind of symmetry. Somehow I use the word symmetry almost improperly, in a sense, because it's a very weird thing, right? Dualities are really symmetries between theories, not between objects of the theories. But at the end of the day, the things you measure are really the same. So they will provide you with the same answer. And if you're interested only in the things you measure experimentally, which I think is an important part of physics, then this is the concept of what duality symmetries. So in principle, these theories might look completely different as you're a scientist, you're a swimmer, and so on. But then you're really interested in the end in experiments and what you can actually measure. So it's a bit of a weird symmetry in this sense, I agree.
Okay. Thank you. So since the very short pitches, let's thank the speaker again. So I would like to welcome Anihita Kamari as the next pitcher.
We face with It's work? No? Okay. We face with several challenges this year. Cancers become more resistant. Food needs to be remain healthier, and battery lose efficiency. And soft biomaterials are not communicate with the body anymore. So we made a wall between the fields, and each field try to solve their problem behind their walls and by their own method. So, but lab works separately, atoms don't. So atoms actually move whatever in the lithium battery or in the cancer cell or in the protein food. So we can actually take the interdisciplinary atomic center view because each large-scale function starts from the small atomic motion. So by understanding the atomic motion and monitoring in the system, we can find the mechanism behind the phenomena. And after that, we can design highly performance molecule. So across the medical, biotechnology, food science, or energy, we can actually find the same atomic logic in the systems. Actually, I took this strategy to solve the project, look unrelated to each other. For example, we actually try to design allosteric drugs against the deubiquitin enzyme. Actually, we work on the manuscript now, designing the highly performance rechargeable batteries by monitoring and finding the mechanism, ion transport mechanism in the system, designing a more efficient therapeutic peptide for neurodegenerative disease by identifying the amyloidogenic region in the system, and optimize the food protein, in this case, the casein in the whey proteins, by understanding the additive interaction in this system. And in general, we can say we can decode the structure-function relationship between the proteins, for the proteins, in many phenomena. And I think we can, for high efficient design for the molecule, we can start from atomic center view. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So do we have questions? So one question I had was, for example, is this a theoretical work or are you doing experiments?
Okay, that means what is the atomistic logic here? Actually, for these cases, I use the molecular dynamics simulation, and I try to keep it simple. I mean, like the classical, but in some of the case, I use some type of the molecular dynamics simulation. For example, I use the enhanced sampling method for some of them. But anyway, we can use the molecular dynamics simulation. And sometimes we can confirm them with the spectroscopic method for the, only confirmation, in my opinion. These two major.
Thank you. So let's thank again the speaker. Now I would like to welcome Aditya Tamar, our next speaker, to the platform.
All right. So in galaxies which have black holes that are billions of times the mass of our sun, one of the consequences of them being really powerful accretors is that they have relativistic jets. And when these jets are along the line of sight to us, we call these sources blazars. Now, blazars in themselves are an incredibly interesting class of sources because they've been known to emit across the electromagnetic spectrum. So we're talking about 18 orders of magnitude in frequency, right from radio frequencies to the gamma rays. And so they're excellent laboratories for multiwavelength astrophysics. Until recently, they got a little more interesting. And this is when neutrinos come into the picture. These subatomic particles, which have an exceptionally mature theory in the standard model, but they're at an equal stage of infancy when it comes to their astrophysical origins. So what IceCube observations, which is this observatory in the South Pole to detect neutrinos, showed that one of the origins for these astrophysical neutrinos could be blazars. And that was well and good, but then the question was that what is so interesting about these sources that they could be neutrino emitters? So just to show an example, the source that you see on your screen is the source PKS 1424240. These are linear polarization radio frequency observations of the source that, by the way, have not been photoshopped. This is actual data at 15 gigahertz. And so here what you're doing is that you're looking into the jet cone of the black hole. So as you go towards the center, you're getting closer to the black hole, your polarization is increasing. So these kind of sources are the sources that I'm dealing with, where the viewing angle is really small, the polarization is extremely high, and they've been indicated that these might be the sources that are interesting for neutrinos. Now, the state of the art right now was that there were population-based statistical studies of what can be done with them. And they showed that these are the kind of sources that if they're radio bright, they're radio loud, they can be sources of neutrinos. And so where my research comes into play is I'm trying to use radio observations as an anchor to not just localize where the neutrino emission is coming from, but also understand the mechanisms that are driving this. So the questions that we're probing is, what is this Goldilocks zone of parameters of magnetic field strength, particle populations, that will not only give you consistency across the electromagnetic spectrum of the data that we already have, but also give you neutrino detections. And this has profound implications for understanding how magnetic fields are distributed in the jets, how are particles accelerated in the jets, and how this fits into the broader context of the next generation of multi-messenger astrophysics. Thank you.
So we have time for a question or two, depending on how long the answer is. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the electromagnetic spectrum. So could you also get additional information from X-ray observations, although not at that resolution?
Yes. So in my day-to-day job of modeling, we look at archival data from radio, optical, infrared, X-ray, and gamma. And so we do something called the SED fitting, which is a spectral energy distribution where you map the flux versus the frequency. And so when you have a certain parameter space that you want to model, you'd like to be consistent with the data across previous frequencies as well. So that's one of the challenges that we have, because one of the greater difficulties is that how do you get one set of parameters that give you across the electromagnetic spectrum and gives you neutrinos? So yeah, we do indeed consider X-rays.
We have some more time for another question. So I have one. How many of these objects do you have where you can look down the beam which comes out of the, down the jet which comes out of the black hole?
About 20 of them.
Just 20?
Yes, as of now, as of last year.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. So thank you very much. So I would like to welcome Svetlana Vasileva, our next pitcher. Please.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, let's talk about skull. This is also kind of the wall for our brain, the ultimate protection. But don't worry, I'm not here to break it. I'm eager to understand how and when it emerges. When we're just being born, we have a little squishy point over our head, which is called frontanel. It's full of stem cells. That's why it's so soft. It allows our brain to expand before bones fuse. And the timing of it is the most interesting part. It's not too late, not too early, perfect to protect while allowing stem growth. And we look at the section of the skull, we can see that it's multi-layered structure. Between bones, there is a special region which is called suture, which is full of stem cells. Exactly on the border between suture and bone lies the heart of my research. Here, stem cells understand whether to become bone or remain potent. If you look on the sample from the top, using microscopy, you can see two main characters of my research, nuclei and collagen. Nuclei show me where the cells are, and collagen is representing extracellular matrix, the scaffold that transmits mechanical cues. If you look at the system long enough, it starts looking back, and you can see the clusters that cells are forming, with no collagen between and really dense structure surrounding them. To capture it more precisely, I developed a computational tool which can extract the intersection masks, special region where cells meet or share boundaries. With this analytical tool, I'm trying to reintroduce the poorly understood concepts such as mesenchymal stem cell polarity, comparing cell-cell interaction and cell-ECM interaction. I also can understand how cells align or collectively react to physical environment. Then I can tune this mechanical condition a bit with releasing of tension or applying stress. And here, more and more questions arise. For example, we can see changes in nuclear shapes and also shapes of collagen network. One of the examples is changing of lattice from triangular to circular. And one of the questions is, what would make triangles become circles? And this is the question that I'm working at right now. Through these images, I'm trying to understand the hidden language of shapes, how this organization can encode mechanics, and how mechanics guides this balance between protection and health development. So skull is not just a barrier, it's a live and adaptive system that can show us how nature emerges and shows the precision and patience. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Please.
Great research. I love it. My question is, could this be used in the future for people who suffer from bone cancer to reconstruct these bone structures?
Well, this research is actually aimed on the diseases with problems of nuclear cell shape and exactly for proteins on nuclear envelope. So, for example, laminopathies would be the decision, not the cancer, because in cancer it's definitely much more complicated than mechanics. And when we talk about diseases with problems with mechanical output of the system, then it could help.
Okay. Other question? Yes, please.
Thank you. So often in nature, shapes arrange in order to maximize efficiency and minimize energy. Have you looked at some minimization procedures of, for example, free chemical energy and things like that?
No, we actually not really able to check the energy. In terms of shapes, it would be analog of taking less space than more, and then it would be maybe more efficient for cells, especially inside the cluster. But we cannot prove it experimentally, but it's actually a lot of fun because you can play with game theory with it, or actually trying to understand what is the contact number for the cluster, or which minimal area it can cover, and then align it theoretically with energy. But we don't do that yet.
Thank you very much. So I would like to welcome Joppe Witstam, our next pitch.
Thank you for the introduction. In these times of large language models and AI chatbots, people tend to forget that we're actually in the second AI craze of the past decade. 10 years ago was the first time a machine beat a human professional in the board game of Go. Shortly after, that machine, AlphaGo, played Lee Sedol, at the time one of the best Go players in the world. AlphaGo won the game 4-1. Lee Sedol is the only human that ever beat AlphaGo. In a few short months, machine learning went from never beating human professionals to never losing. Now Go is just a board game, and today's ambition is artificial general intelligence, machines that act competently in any setting. If these systems surpass human capability in practically any domain, it will be dangerous if we are not able to steer these systems towards goals that we intend them to pursue. This problem might best be explained as an analogy to evolution. Evolution and machine learning are both optimization processes that produces intelligence, humans, and learned models, respectively. These intelligences are themselves able to optimize for goals. The goals that these intelligences optimize for, they are instilled by machine learning and evolution, but only approximately mimicking the goals of evolution and machine learning. Just as humans started pursuing goals that are at odds with the goal of reproductive success, for example, by the invention of contraceptives, learned models are expected to pose a threat to the goals that we try to instill in them. Currently, leading AI labs are trying to create increasingly autonomous and agentic systems based on large language models embedded in increasingly complex environments. My research is motivated by the need to understand the safety implications of these systems. This requires an interdisciplinary effort from computer scientists, cognitive scientists, physicists, and maybe even social scientists and philosophers. And I urge leaders of science and funding bodies to facilitate this research to safeguard the future of humanity. Thank you.
So I already see one hand risen.
It's obviously a supercritical question. Philip Gerbach from Venture Labs. It's obviously a supercritical question. It's funny because I used this example tens of thousands of times to say what makes you optimistic, or what approach can you even think of to think you might be able to align a superior intelligence, right? I think the reproduction is a perfect example, right?
It might be impossible. Yeah, you might be very pessimistic. Yeah. I try to be optimistic in the goal of actually making these systems safe, but you might be right. It might be impossible.
Another comment or question? Yes, please.
Yes. Do you think that unless the intelligence has some kind of embodiment in the physical world, that it actually can pose any kind of a threat? Because can a set of virtual intelligences understand enough of the consequences of trying to turn itself off if it's not physically embodied?
Yeah, actually, I do think that embodiment is required. I think that large language models, the words that they are manipulating, they are not grounded in our world. But I think that the direction that AI labs are taking, they are training it in more embodied modality, and I think that this is a worrisome direction.
Okay, thank you very much I would like to thank all the speakers, and we will be now moving to our next session, which is on astrophysical perspectives with Shimiho Janvier and Brian Schmidt. I would like to welcome them up here. I will sit there, thank you. Please. And I will sit here on the side. So I would. Sorry?
Am I allowed?
So I would like, before we start this discussion, maybe you could briefly introduce yourself to the audience, starting with you, please.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Miho Janvier. I am a solar and space physicist at the European Space Agency.
I'm Brian Schmidt. I am an astronomer at the Australian National University, having spent 8 years as the president of that university. That is a job I don't recommend unless you're really serious about wanting to run a university.
Okay. So I would like to invite you both, thank you for being here, to speak about your views about possible developments in your research field, breakthroughs and challenges in the first part of this session. So please go ahead.
Let you go first.
Okay, great. So as I said earlier, I'm a solar and space physicist, and you may wonder, what is this? So I didn't want to expand too much at the beginning. What it actually means is that I study the sun and the sun's activity and how it shapes the bubble of space we live in. So when I say we live in, I mean planet Earth and all the other planets of the solar system. And so one of the challenges is that the sun's activity actually peaks and wanes over time in what we call the solar cycle. And we have no idea why that works. So I would say that one of the major challenges is to understand this, but also to understand what the atmosphere of the sun is, how it is behaving. And the reason is because it's the place where we have all this activity, these eruptions, these storms that are going to be launched in space from the sun all the way to the ends of the solar system. So in terms of breakthrough, I would say that at the moment, I think we're on the verge of understanding this. We have a space mission that we launched 5 years ago, and it took us 5 years really to orbit around the sun and start to get out of the plane of the orbits of the planets of the solar system. And for the first time in the history of humanity, we are looking at the poles of the sun. And this is a missing piece of understanding how the magnetic field, this big magnet that the sun is behaving. So watch out this space for the next few years, I guess. Okay. Thank you.
All right, so I'm a cosmologist, and we live in a universe that is expanding. Everywhere we look, things are moving away from us, galaxies are moving away from us. The further away they are, the faster their redshift, or the larger their redshift is. Now, one of the things that a group of which I was part of that was eventually awarded the Nobel Prize discovered in 1998 is that the universe is speeding up over time. That was a surprise because gravity should be slowing the universe down, yet the universe appears to be speeding up. And we have resorted to something we call generically dark energy, but we normally think of as being Einstein's cosmological constant. It's a very single term that can be added to his equations of general relativity that actually would cause space to speed up in its expansion. It essentially causes gravity to push rather than pull. Now, trying to figure out what causes the actual expansion, is it a cosmological constant, is challenging for theorists because there are literally tens of thousands of ways to mimic a cosmological constant with almost no way to tell the difference between them. What astronomers have done, and I would say we've been sort of invaded by physicists as a discipline, is by doing bigger and bigger experiments where we're able to make more and more precise measurements of the expansion history of the universe back in time. And what those have started to show in the last couple years is a potential deviation from the theory of Einstein's cosmological constant. Now, the deviation is small, it's a couple percent, and I don't think we quite believe it. But it is there in the data, and we're going to get more data in the next few years to kind of see if it's statistically robust. We actually see it from two methods. One, the type 1a supernovae that we used all the way back in 1998, but probably more importantly, something called baryon acoustic oscillations, which are essentially the sound waves that the universe had in it right after the Big Bang that ultimately created structures and galaxies that we can see over time. So we have a problem in that the deviations are perhaps not expected, and the theory necessary to explain it, I would say after 20 years, well, even longer, 27 years now after the discovery, has still not really developed any smoking gun of what might cause a deviation like we're seeing. To make life even worse, we also have experiments where we compare the expansion rate of the universe right now as measured from our position, and then the expansion rate of the universe inferred from these baryon acoustic oscillations, which is essentially, you can measure them very precisely when the universe was 380,000 years old, and you can bring them to the present day using the model, and you can do that very precisely. The problem is they disagree by 8%. And the variation of dark energy is exciting. This, what we call the Hubble tension, is exciting, but no one has been able to figure out any way to do the same, the two things. They seem to go in different directions. So I would say we have a potential crisis in our understanding of cosmology, which 15 years ago looked like was really boring and we had sewed up and had everything down to the second decimal place. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to solve this, but that's what's coming up right now.
Okay, thank you. So, me as a particle physicist, I immediately have one question to Brian. So we, in our standard opening lectures, when we motivate why we were looking for beyond the standard model physics, dark matter comes up, dark energy we mention, but stay a bit away from it. But what does this mean, this tension you just mentioned, quantitatively? I mean, I usually start my lectures or my presentation with that there's 27% dark matter in the universe, if you look at the energy matter content. But what does it mean, these tensions? If I would take these and vary it, how much would the 27% dark matter content vary?
So it turns out that the dark matter content, which is something I didn't talk about there, is another part of this piece where we need to have some undiscovered particle, potentially, that does not interact very often, or if at all, with baryons or with atomic matter that we have here on Earth. So the variation that we're seeing here is tiny.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really change that number much. What it changes is what happens in the future. So we tell a story. Well, the universe has started to accelerate. It'll accelerate forever. Eventually, we will look out into an empty universe. But if the dark energy is rapidly changing, then all bets are off of what the future is. Is it going to convert into something else? Is it going to just disappear, although you got to make this work in general relativity in complicated ways? I think it really throws into question what we could know about the future of our universe. And I'm pragmatic. At some point, I accept maybe I don't know. Okay. Maybe I'm never going to know what came before the Big Bang. Maybe I'm never going to know what the distant future of the universe is like. Maybe that's the answer. But I'd like to have something a little more definitive that I can tell in my talks.
So coming back to the sun, I have one. What I'm wondering is about. So you have said that's the first time we will look at the poles of the sun, and so could you, because I'm not from your field, explain to me why are you so excited about it? So what are the possible insights you may get, and then and the impact on, for example, life on Earth? Or even neutrino physics, because the sun is also a source of neutrinos. I mean, could you develop a bit on that?
Yeah, okay, so a lot of questions in one question.
Yes.
I would say, so there are a lot of exciting things. I've only talked about the poles of the sun, but first of all, the reason why I said it's a missing piece of the puzzle is because, again, the sun and stars in general are big giant magnets. And we have the technology now to measure the magnetic field on the surface of the sun, and then we can actually do that also for other stars. However, if you're trying to model something, if you can't see where most of the magnetic field is located at the poles, then you can't actually model it really, really well. And so that generates the question of, okay, so then how is the magnetic field of the sun structured? And we know that this magnetic field is what structures everything in the atmosphere of the sun, where we have those huge explosions that will eventually make what we call space weather, so the weather in space. So that's why it's really exciting to look at the poles, in the sense that it's uncharted territories. We don't really know what to find. And we like to, although what we have seen so far is not as extraordinary, I would say, as what we have seen on for Saturn and Jupiter. But we have missions that went to explore those two, what we call the giant planets of the solar system. And when Juno for Jupiter and Cassini, which were two missions that went and looked at the poles of these planets, they found structures that we would have never imagined. And this is what we're seeing a little bit about the sun. We are, from the first views that we had this year, we are seeing that the poles are actually moving and changing. And that might be one of the keys why the solar cycle is moving up and down over time. So now to your question about what does it, what's the consequences for us? I talked about space weather. So space weather is basically the changes in the space environment of the planets of the solar system. And for us, we are starting to put a lot of satellites. We are actually impacted, at least our societies are impacted by space weather. It impacts our telecommunication with satellites. It impacts also electricity grids. And so we are more and more reliant on this understanding of how the sun works. And so understanding how this magnetic field is generated, how it evolves over time, it's also a way of predicting space weather and mitigating the consequences of space weather on us. Now, something that I like to tell people is the reason why I went into astrophysics. I'd like to know why you went into the field. But for me, when I was little, I wanted to find aliens. So other life on other. Well, to be fair, it's one of the other walls to be falling in the future. I believe. But what we're realizing is that us on Earth, we're really in the neighborhood of an active star, and we are discovering thousands now of exoplanets, and some of them are orbiting around very active other stars as well. And so that really raises the question of, can a planet sustain life, and in what form, if this planet, this exoplanet outside of the solar system, is orbiting around a star that is 1,000 times, 10,000 times more active than the sun? So the key question of what does the sun do and how it impacts us ultimately can be extrapolated to the search of life in other star systems. I haven't replied for the neutrinos, but I can talk a little bit about the particles aspect, because I think that's what you like. So not so much the neutrinos, because there are not that many changes, but what's really interesting is that the magnetic field of the sun, as I said, it really goes all the way to the ends of the solar system. It's actually a magnetic bubble that protects us from all the energetic particles that come from outer space. So we had a presentation earlier about blazars, for example. We have all these huge events, very energetic events in the universe. Some of them really send towards us what we call cosmic rays. And we actually are shielded by cosmic rays thanks to the sun. So it's not that bad. So, yeah.
Thank you. So maybe you have some questions. I mean, this should be a conversation among you both. So or vice versa.
Do you believe in life on other planets?
Well, I mean, space weather is a kind of a mystery, because it connects into one of the themes of this, into long-term climate change, or drivers of climate. So do you think you're going to be able to make predictions of the strength of the solar cycle on a 10-year, 15-year in advance, or do you think that's going to remain illusory?
I think we're getting there, but we're not there yet. And so the thing that has escaped us is we know roughly that this solar cycle is around 11 to 13 years, and we've known that actually since around Galileo's age, when we started pointing, well, not we, us, but back in the days when they started putting telescopes at the sun, and you can actually monitor this solar cycle with the presence of what we call sunspots, that are kind of freckles on the surface of the sun. And you can see that from the 17th century, that we have this oscillation in the cycle. But there have been in the past minima where there was no sunspots for years. And what we have seen so far is that we have a really some difficulties to predict what's going to happen in even in the recent years. So we had predictions about the last solar cycle that were completely off, this solar cycle as well. And what we start to understand is that actually this 11 to 13-year cycle might be modulated by something that is even longer, maybe hundreds of years. And so that's why I mean by we're gathering more data. We have more of an understanding. We're getting there, but there might be something of a second order that is making us not, going there just yet, if I may say.
Yeah, because the prediction, if you're trying to put up constellations of satellites, if you have a very big solar cycle, the atmosphere puffs up and it causes orbits to drag. And if you knew that were happening, you would put your satellites in different orbits and stuff, depending on what you could predict. Yeah.
Well, so I would say this is the long-term prediction in terms of the solar cycle. I would say that we are also going there in terms of more short-term prediction. And so we know where this space weather activity comes from. We have those sunspots. We can see them growing over time. And I would say that we are this moment in time where we see how complex they become. And we can't say with certainty whether one region of the sun is going to give a lot of space weather, but we have a good idea. And just as an example, there have been some Starlink that were lost upon their launch because there was a big solar storm arriving. So we knew that. Some people apparently didn't hear the scientists saying that that was not a good time to send satellites.
Coronal mass ejection, delay your launch. Your launch, yes. Oh well.
Yeah.
They'll learn next time.
Yeah.
So looking at the time, we have, maybe we can open up to the audience for questions to our discussion partners here.
Yeah, hi. I have to switch it on? No, it's okay. Yeah, hi, thanks. I would have a question actually regarding cosmology. So, Brian, to you. I was aware about the interesting question of is it dark energy or just a constant, cosmological constant? And I believe Euclid is looking after that was recently launched. However, I was not aware that there's already some signal that maybe it's really changing over the scales. So this is really new to me and exciting to hear. May I ask, where is it seen? Is it at small c or large c values, or is it in and how much sigmas, if I may ask?
Yeah, okay. So the signal has come out in the last 12 months. So it's seen in two experiments. One is called DESI, the Dark Energy Spectroscopic Instrument, which has literally looked at tens of millions of galaxies. And then they're looking for essentially the sound scale that is imprinted in the cosmic microwave background. If you see this early all-sky image of the leftover of the Big Bang, when the universe was hot, there's actually an acoustic scale there that has a size that is imprinted in the galaxies. And when you go through and look at that sound scale, it changes and deviates at about, depending on how you look at it, between a skeptic would say 2, the team would say 4 standard deviations. That is about a 2% effect, and the redshift is at about 0.3. So what it's basically saying is that the universe was accelerating, and then as soon as the density of dark energy became dominant, it started fading away, and essentially its energy density no longer was constant, but seems to be dropping now. That's what the data to first order says. So you're going to have Euclid. You're going to have the second half of the DESI data. You also have supernova experiments, which, if you look at that, see potentially a signal that is consistent with the DESI signal. Now, the supernova are right on the hairy edge of what you can do right now. They've kind of done what they can, in my opinion. So I think these baryon acoustic oscillation measurements over the next couple years will, first thing I want to see is with a completely independent set of data, do you still see the signal? And then we need to make sure there isn't some weird systematic error that could creep in. It's a pretty hard to mess up signal, so I'm more optimistic on that. But it's kind of exciting. It's a mess. All my beautiful talks I've been giving for the last 20 years are kind of, and yeah, I really don't know what's going on. So that's a little disappointing. But that's science. It means my field still has a rich future.
Yeah, thank you. So I saw first this, and then the.
So my question was to Professor Schmidt. What's your perspective on the next generation of space missions that might help you resolve the tensions that you talked about? Because there's heliophysics at one end where the source is in our backyard, and then there's like black hole imaging missions which go like to the distant black holes. And there are complications with CMBS-4, as we all know. So is there a science case to be made for next generation space missions?
So there's a whole bunch of things we can do. And one of my challenges, and I'm not going to sound like a cosmologist here, is the cosmology missions are huge and tend to be kind of single purpose. So you literally go through and you take 100 million lowest signal per object measurements you can, and at the end of it you crank around and 100 people spend 10 years of their lives and you get an answer. That's not a very rich experimental environment. Then you have something like James Webb Space Telescope that, you know, everyone and their dog can use the data to do all sorts of things. So I think we need to have a balanced portfolio where we keep on doing things where small groups can be very creative and we make new discoveries, and then we have to be very selective of the type of giant cosmology experiments we do. And you know, there are rooms to do things like solar missions, which I think are really important and interesting, that are completely different. So I think we need to be portfolio based, and I would be very careful at squeezing out instruments in the future that have thousands of different projects that can be done as opposed to just single purpose experiments.
Okay. Please. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I have tried to keep myself away from physics my entire life. That's why I studied geology. And when they explained me in the first place the changes of climate in the Earth system, they spoke about the Milankovitch cycles. And that's a theory that is already 100 years old. Speaking about solar system weather, what could you tell me that is there any other cycle or phenomena in the solar system that conditions the climate of the Earth in geological timescales?
It's an interesting question. I would say that it's a very, how to say that? It's a tricky discussion to be had with people who are really interested in the climate, in the sense that the Earth ecosystem, so the fact that the Earth has an atmosphere, is really very much the main driver of having this atmosphere, the changing in the atmospheres on Earth. Of course, you have the input. I mean, the main energy source is our sun, and you may relate. You may try. I don't know whether that was the how to say that the question that you were trying to ask, whether the solar cycle can impact climate, for example, on Earth or other planets. Of course, the sun's variability will impact to a certain extent the Earth's climate, because this is the input of energy that we have. But over the solar cycle, or over this 100-year of this envelope or secondary, how to say that, evolution of the solar cycle that I was pointing out, there's actually a very minimal fraction of change for climate on Earth. So the solar cycle very much changes the space environment, but the input in terms of energy, the light that we get from the sun, doesn't change that much. Okay. And as such, the climate change on Earth is very much a planet problem, I would say. And you can have the same, of course, depending on the orbits of other planets, the amount of daylight that they get because of their rotation, etc. Their climate is going to change as well, of course, with the input of the sun. but the solar cycle, at least for us, doesn't change the climate change that we have seen on Earth.
That's why you should be really glad you live on Earth and have the sun. Sun is a very nice star. It's better behaved than average. I
Yes, yeah.
So I want to switch to this side of the room. I see a few, please, yeah, go ahead. The lady here, exactly.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for your perspective. And yes, speaking of well-behaved stars, I actually, just like you, Micho, I'm hoping to find aliens. So there's this complication with M dwarfs as host stars for exoplanets, because they typically do have a lot of planets, but those planets are typically on very tight orbits, and M dwarfs tend to be very active.
Yep.
So speaking of that, what is your take on the activity of these stars as pertaining to the habitability of the planetary systems? Should we exclude them completely? What should we do?
So very interesting question, and I think I will go back to what is the future of the solar system exploration that we're trying to do. We've realized that it's highly unlikely to find traces of biological life on other planets, especially the outer planets of the solar system, but we're highly interested in the moons of these planets. And so we've got icy worlds, for example, orbiting around Jupiter and Saturn that may actually have traces. We don't know. That's what we're going to try to discover in the next 10 to 20 years, maybe traces of biological life. And so what's interesting is that those giant planets, they have a really strong magnetic field. And the same as what I was saying earlier for the sun, that we live in this bubble of magnetic field that the sun has created. These moons orbiting around Jupiter and Saturn are also shielded in a way by the magnetic field of these planets. So you're right that as a first look, you may think, okay, planets orbiting around active stars, such as M dwarfs, it might be difficult to find traces of life, but maybe some of them have moons, and maybe that's a really good bet. But we're not there yet, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Please, yep.
Yeah, thank you. I have one question to Ms. Janvier and one question to Mr. Schmidt. First, for Ms. Janvier, you mentioned that the pole of the magnetic field of the sun is always changing, right? And then, yes, according to the Maxwell equation, if the magnetic field is changing, so it can generate also the electric field, and then at the end, we will find also the electromagnetic field. So, do we already have we already found this electric field or electromagnetic wave from the suns?
Yeah.
That's my question. And then the second to Mr. Schmidt is, yes, we know that the universe is expanded according to the Hubble theory, right? And then it's already proved. So my question is, I've never heard, or maybe, yes, I miss it. Is there also expansion in our solar systems? Because as long as we know until now, for instance, the distance between the Earth and the Sun is always mentioned 150 kilometers. I mean, there is no literature mentioned that the distance is already changed, let's say 200 kilometers till now. So that's the question. Thank you.
You go first.
Okay, let me remind. So, sorry, what was the? I was thinking about the second question.
The electromagnetic wave.
Yeah, sorry, yes. Yeah, very, very good. So, this is going to the generation of the magnetic field, and indeed, it's an electromagnetic field. It's generated due to the material that the sun and other stars are made of, what we call a plasma. So in everyday life, we know about solid matter, we know about liquids, and then the air that we breathe is gas. If you heat this gas even more, what we call ions and electrons, so what makes the atom, are going to basically break apart. And that is going to create what we call a plasma. And so this motion of plasma, exactly from Maxwell's equation, is going to create an electric and a magnetic field. So we must see, you can so both of it, they are the same, how to say that? They are the two parts of the same phenomenon. We'll have to mostly talk about the magnetic fields, because in the way we describe the sun, we mostly talk about the magnetic field, but of course the counterpart is an electric field. And the electric or magnetic field that we see actually also expands into the solar system. So we have probes that are going to measure the electric fields and the magnetic fields as well. So the electromagnetic waves are everywhere, they permeate space, and we measure them directly. So, yeah.
So your question with respect to how the universe works. So when we think of the universe, you can start it out as essentially a homogeneous sphere that's expanding, that has small little deviations in it. And that small little deviations by gravity start to collapse. And so the Earth, just to remind you, has a density of about 5,500 kilograms per meter cubed. The density of the universe is about 10 to the minus 30 kilograms per meter cubed. So we're a pretty unusual part of the universe. And we're a part of the universe where the gravity has brought things together. And so we have been bound by gravity, and we have overcome the initial expansion after the Big Bang, probably 13 billion years ago. The Milky Way collapsed down and then fragmented. Eventually, 4.5 billion years ago, our sun and solar system were formed. So it turns out that the Andromeda galaxy, the nearest large galaxy, is actually coming towards us. And that's because we're gravitationally bound as well. So even out to the Andromeda galaxy, the universe is not expanding. Gravity has overcome that. There is more or less a sphere around us that is roughly 10 million light years in radius, where the universe is bound. And then outside that, the universe starts to expand forever. And we're not quite sure what the future of the universe is. If the universe is accelerating, things inside that gravitational bound are eventually going to collapse to form a supergalaxy. And then outside that sphere, things get dragged off to infinity, and we can't see anything except for our supergalaxy. But as I said, dark energy suddenly goes away, then that story isn't quite so clean, because I don't really know what's going to happen.
Thank you. So I'm looking here, this time is red and 0, but I'm looking at my time. Oh yeah, it's also 11:50.
That's 0 everywhere you look at it.
Sorry, time flies by. So I think I will have to stop this discussion here. Thank you very much for both of you, and also the audience for your questions. And I will hand over to Thomas for the next part. Thank you very much.